fictitious name. Is a fictitious name of a person who could be really anyone. I picked Jerry because today, and like in the world, half of the world is Jerry. In fact, Disney came out with a film, and I want to speak about there's a film that they made called Soul, and in that film, everybody in heaven is called Jerry. So Jerry is a popular name, and we named the book Seven Conversations with Jerry just to attract people to maybe think about buying the book and not feel in the shiva house. It was written primarily for more a secular crowd, and so I didn't want it to be if I would have said Yankel or Chaim or whatever, people might not buy the book. So
well, it worked because we bought it. So what prompted you? Give us a little background. You're a busy shliach. You built a beautiful community up in Markham, Ontario. What prompted you to have such a particular interest and to sit down and write this entire book, Seven Conversations with Jerry? What led you to write this book?
Okay, very good question. Shliach, as we know, is generally busy 24/7. But within the context of our work, part of what we do is we work on bereavement. We go visiting shiva houses. We're constantly visiting people. People are asking us very strong, good questions. People that are lost a loved one, they're broken to pieces, and they're looking for something that will give them more meaning in life. It's actually a very, very great opportunity to bring people closer and to get them to understand a little Yiddishkeit and to learn about Hashem. That they're looking for it. So I went to the shiva houses and I was speaking to people. And most of what people are given are books about what to do, when to stand, when to sit, how to cut the kriya, which are all very important books to know exactly the mechanics of mourning and shiva house and what I found was what was really lacking and missing was someone who's sitting for 7 days in the shiva house and they really need to hear about the neshama. The only thing that possibly could comfort people is knowing that their father or mother or brother or sister or spouse or sibling or child are still there somewhere. And that's the only true comfort that people can have is that they still can maintain a connection with them. And that connection, there are things that we can do to reconnect. And so there was nothing about that. I read recently, actually, there's a few good books that came out from Kahas, from the Rebbe, which came out the last year or two. But before that, there was absolutely nothing on the market. So it encouraged me. And as a shliach, it took me about 10 years to write this book because I don't have a lot of time on my hands. And I decided to write it initially just as a self-help book. Then I saw that, it's overload information. So I decided to turn it into a novel, into a story. And that's what it is. It's Seven Conversations with Jerry. Jerry is a typical congregant who lost his father, and he has a lot of issues with his father. He has to make peace with his father. He said the wrong thing before his father died, and he wants to rebuild that connection. And the rabbi comes to the house, the shiva house, and he has 7 conversations in the course of the year, different conversations with Jerry that turn around Jerry's life. And at the end of the book, the rabbi and Jerry create a very close bond. And I'm not going to give away what happens at the end of the book, but it's something that's worthwhile buying the book so you can see how the book ends. But the idea is that it's a give and take, a conversation, and it deals with the hard-hitting issues. And I want to tell you, I don't think there's anyone that has as much as about these conversations as the great resource of Torah, but especially what's in Chassidus, and especially in the teachings of the Rebbe. The history of the world, there hasn't been so much information about how to rebuild a connection with someone that's passed on. As we know, the Rebbe, over the period of 40 years, he spoke about our continuous connection with the Frierdiker Rebbe. And he gave us everything that one could do to connect to a Rebbe. But while he was doing that, he also gave us the way to connect to any of our loved ones. And I think that there's so much, there's a wealth of information that I try to share in a very, very palatable way in this book.
So can you tell us, how did it affect you? You spoke about your role as the shliach, as comforting somebody, going into a shiva house, doing the rabbinic pastoral role. What about at a personal level? How did this research and your experience affect you?
Yeah, well, I just want to tell you, it's mamish. Everything is worth hashgacha pratis.
You
So I
think
wrote,
everything is hashgacha?
yeah. So 10 years I'm working on this book, and at the end I have the manuscript and I'm working on it, and I'm almost ready to go to print, etc. I haven't yet gone to print. And we had a special child. His name was Zalmi. He was a young boy. In fact, he had Down syndrome, and he was a very, very challenging young boy, but at the same time a great joy in our lives. We loved him to bits. We loved him to pieces. He was with us for many, many years. And just as I'm finishing this book, my son passes away. A police comes into shul. I'm davening a shul on a Sunday morning, and a cop comes in and says, I say, how can I help you? Because I usually police come in, it's for something, for someone else. And he says, are you the father of Baruch Shnei Zalman Plotkin? So I said, yeah. My heart fell out of, He said, your son just passed away. Mamashah. I was totally lost, and I felt pain in my heart, and we had a funeral. It was the most sad funeral possible, and because, like I say, we loved him to bits. And I'm sitting in the shiva house, and you have time in your hands. I decide I'm going to have a few minutes. I'm going to look over the book, try to do some final thing, and I start reading this book, and I find that ironically, instead of being the author, I became the beneficiary. I became the
7 Conversations with Rabbi Plotkin.
Yeah. So a lot of the ideas that were in the book actually turned around to comfort me. We dedicated the book to our son Zalmi. You could see it in the first page here. There was a special dedication to him.
Maybe an aliyah for his neshama, our sympathy. So one question that people often ask is, how come we don't find on page 1 of the Torah that talks about the soul and the afterlife? It seems like it's not as front and center as we might have imagined. Where is it? Where do you look?
Right. Well, I'd say 2 things. First of all, things which are very obvious that the Torah doesn't talk a lot about. Things which are logical and just make sense. The Torah doesn't have to teach us that if you believe that there's a soul, obviously there's an afterlife. It's not a big chiddush. If we say the soul is a piece of God, which the Torah clearly tells us, it's a piece of chelik lekam mimal, which the Alter Rebbe says, but in Psukim chelik Hashem amoy, if we have a piece of Hashem with it, it's quite an obvious understanding that it's impossible that a piece of God dissipates after the passing. That's one thing. And the other thing is, I don't think the Torah is trying to tell us that the main focus is not the afterlife. The main focus is this life here. And that one moment of Torah and mitzvahs in this world is greater than the whole world to come. So the Torah is telling us, the Torah is a blueprint of what we should do in this world. Although it alludes to the world to come, but it's not the blueprint for the world to come. It's the blueprint for this world. And so that's the main focus of the Torah. So it doesn't speak so much about it, although in the Torah comes with the oral tradition. And the Torah without the oral tradition is you don't know what tefillin are, you don't know what an esrog is, you don't know what anything is. We obviously know that it has to come hand in hand with the oral tradition. So the Gemara speaks about it at great length of it, and it tells us it's alluded to in Az Yashir and other places, but it tells us unequivocally there's an afterlife. All the books of the prophets, it speaks about the afterlife, the revival of the dead, Tchias HaMesim. All those things are there. So it's the Torah is not just the 5 books of Moses. It's a complete piece, and it's there all over the place.
Okay, well, Rabbi, your book offers insights into the afterlife, into our relationship with people after they've passed. I'm gonna put myself on mute. I'm going to ask you to do your best to summarize some of the lessons that you can share with us tonight about our relationship with people after they passed away, about the eternality of the neshama, and about our opportunity to be in that kind of relationship. And at the end, we're going to open up for questions. And again, if people prefer to unmute themselves and ask the question, that's fine. And if people prefer to put it in the chat, and if you want to chat it just to me privately, it will remain anonymous, and I'll ask the questions to the rabbi. I'm going to fade out here myself, and I'm going to ask Rabbi Plotkin to share with us many of his insights from his research and his study, and from his new book. Again, it's called 7 Conversations with Jerry. We have it available for purchase. You speak to us after tonight, and we'll be happy to make that arrangement.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rabbi. And here comes the Rabbi Sermon. But I really would like, if if you ask questions, it really helps a lot afterwards, because you learn a lot from your teachers, but you learn more from your students. So when there's questions and answers, the interaction, like it's conversations with Jerry, that's very important. That there is the give and take. So please, if you like to ask through the chat, or you could ask on through the rabbi privately, or you can unmute yourself or reveal yourself. You're also welcome to do so. Some people don't like to reveal themselves on the Zoom, but if you decide to reveal yourself, I'm more than happy to see you. It gives me a little bit more feedback. So just going, like I said, there's an amazing resource that I take from the Rebbe's teachings, and it was a story that happened many years ago in the late 60s. It was after the 6-Day War, and one of the great generals of the Israeli army, probably the greatest general that ever lived, he also was a prime minister, was a fellow named Ariel Sharon, who's also known as Arik Sharon. And after they won the war in 67, it was an amazing victory. He came to the Kotel, and he came to thank Hashem. It was the first time we were able to go to the Kotel. He came there. And of course, before he got there was already a Chabad stand putting on tefillin with people. So they put on tefillin with him, and he had his son with him. I think his son just turned bar mitzvah, and he put on tefillin with him over there at the Kotel. And that was his first connection to Chabad, Ariel Sharon, with this rabbi at the Kotel at the time. And a few months later, it was Rosh Hashanah time. So this was in June, but it's Rosh Hashanah time. He came home for the family meal. They were sitting, I think Rosh Hashanah afternoon. They were having a beautiful meal together with the family. And they send the kids out to go play in the backyard. Because he lived on a farm, so it was a big farm. And the kids went to play in the barn, the farm. And while they're eating, they hear bullet shots. And Sharon gets really scared. He's a general. He runs out and he gives a look. Tragedy of tragedy. His son, Gur Sharon, a young boy, the apple of his eye, was killed by one of his friends playing with the guns. And could you imagine the tragedy of losing a child? Like I said, I relate to it myself. There's nothing like it. And he was shot. Sharon grabbed him right away. He's a soldier. He jumped out and he jumped into a car and he ran to the hospital. And unfortunately, his young son died in his arms. Can't be more tragic than that. So he was totally despondent. He was totally hurt. He sat down the shiva. He just gave up on everything. And that Chabad rabbi who met him at the Kotel a few months earlier came to the Shiva house and said he saw how sad Sharon was. He said, "Why don't you write a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe? The Rebbe he's an inspiration. He'll write to him. He speaks to the Israeli soldiers and so the Sharon wrote a letter to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe immediately responded. And in the letter, I found something that sort of guided my book, and there were 3 concepts that were in this letter that I felt were really all powerful and to help us all. going through, anyone who goes through these kind of things, or anyone else just in life. There were three very, very major points the Rebbe made in this. And the Rebbe said, first he asked them a question. We all know when you go into a Shiva house, everyone comes to comfort the mourners. They all stand there. And there's a prayer that said, most of you probably know it, may God comfort you amongst the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. So basically, when we come to the mourner, we include ourselves. We say, you're mourning, it's very tragic, but we include ourselves. We say we're all mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. We're all mourners of the destruction of the temple. Until the temple is not rebuilt in Jerusalem, we're still in a state of mourning. And this was especially applicable before there was even Israel. Jews were saying this for thousands of years, this prayer, amongst the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. And today we still mourn with Tisha B'Av. We mourn the destruction of the temple. So that's our sort of our little interaction with the mourner, the official interaction. So the Rebbe writes in the letter to Sharon, it's a little bit odd that this should be the prayer we should say to people who are mourning. Why would we say something like that? I mean, like imagine you come into someone lost a parent, and you from that and from cancer, let's say, you say, oh, my sister also has cancer. She died also from that. So what are you doing? Like, what are you saying? We're also mourners. Like, what comfort are you giving to the mourner by letting them know that you also have problems? Okay, fine. We all have problems. We all have tzaras. But the focus should be not on yourself when you come to a Shiva house. It should be on the mourner. You should be say something comforting to the mourner, not say, we're all mourning. We all know what it means to suffer. We all suffer the destruction of the temple. It sounds a little bit insensitive, but the Rebbe was saying, no. The reason why we mention Jerusalem here, and we mention the temple in Jerusalem to the mourner, is because by doing so, we are giving great comfort to the mourner, and in three ways. The first point that the Rebbe said was that just like Jerusalem, they destroyed the body of Jerusalem, that when the Romans came in and they destroyed the temple, they only destroyed the brick and the mortar, but they never destroyed the spirit of the Jewish people. That lived on. Likewise, when a person dies, only the body is gone, but the soul lives on. The second point is that we say, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, we all believe that we will reconnect to the temple one day, living and seeing the temple with our physical eyes. So too, we as Jews believe that we can reconnect with the temple. We reconnect to a parent, to a loved one, not just their spirit, but also their physical body one day. But until then, we can connect to them in many different ways. So this is the second point. First point is that we believe that just like Jerusalem, the spirit lives on. We believe that our parents, our loved ones' souls lives on. The second point is that we can reconnect. And the third point is that just like Jerusalem is part of a bigger picture, and all of the Jewish people were part of it, and no one could say that the destruction of Jerusalem was a private issue. So too, when anyone loses a loved one, it's not just a loss for the individual person or the individual family. It's really a loss for every single Jew. We're all hurt because it's part of the same mission. It's part of the same big picture. Okay, those are the 3 points. But now I'm going to tell you what that meant to me and how I connect to it. And so the first point is that the soul lives on. And that's a very important point that we have to say to ourselves over and over and over again. When you go to the funeral, before the funeral, even I've visited many people, I'm sure the rabbi has as well. And, when someone's very, very sick and, the very last moments of life, the body is failing. The body is falling apart to pieces. But somehow when you're there, you feel their soul is unchanging. The body keeps on getting weaker and weaker, but the soul, you feel that the soul, at the moment the person dies, you can feel the transition. You can feel you haven't lost a loved one. They're there. The family can feel, they can perceive the presence of the person even after they die. I know it sounds like a spiritual thing, but it's a real thing. everybody, anyone that's gone through the experience knows that our soul continues to exist, and especially that we know that the soul is a piece of God. When you go to the cemetery, you bury the body. That's the body that's being buried. But the soul, we believe and we know, lives on. Because what is a soul? A soul, the soul of man. It says when God created Adam and Eve, He breathed into Adam's soul a breath, Adam a breath of life. What is that breath that comes from God, from God's innermost part? That's the soul. So God breathed into Adam a breath of life. And that breath of life is in every soul of every Jew. So every soul of every human being is something which has a piece. It's a piece of God. And just like God is indestructible, the soul is also indestructible. That's a big point that I keep on making over and over again, but that's what the Rebbe was telling Ariel Sharon, that just like the spirit of Jerusalem never died, the spirit of every single soul continues to live on, but not just the soul, also the personality and the mission. Many people are concerned that when they lose a loved one, maybe they believe that the spirit lives on, but does that spirit still maintain its personality? Or is it like swallowed up in this great divine space? Does it keep their personality? Does it keep who they are? Can we maintain still a relationship with the soul? Does the soul remember who we are? Right? Is a father still a father, a mother, a spouse, a sibling, a child? Is that relationship still there? Do they have memory? Do they remember who they are when they're up there, or they're just blown away by what's up there? There's this great party up there in heaven, and they forget about the people down on earth. Lots of people are concerned about that. Lots of people, there was once a number of years ago, there was a famous singer, and not a Jewish singer. He made a whole song. He lost also a child. He fell in Eric Clapton. He lost his child. His child fell out of the window of the 86th floor in Manhattan or something. And he composed a song afterwards. Yeah? Will you know me when you see me in heaven? That's what's bothering him. He says, will you know me? Like, will you still recognize me when you see me in heaven? So this is something that we believe that not just the soul lives on, but the soul personality continues to live on, and the memories and the relationships and the connections. And that's what the Yizkor is about, and many of the different different minhagim, customs are tied in with the fact that we believe that the souls come back to us. In many places it says even that the souls come to the house. Some great rabbis, they came to the house for Kiddush back. In other words, they still maintain a palpable and strong connection. And then we come to the second point. The second point is not just that there is a soul, but the point of reconnection. But I want to tell you that to me, that was very, very important. It's very important to know that for my child, to know that his personality continues, that he lives on. Every soul has a mission, and you want to know that mission is still alive. When my son passed away, we went to a place that there was like an organization that was helping him out, special needs. So they used to gather together and come. There were many counselors. There's a place called Rena here in Toronto where the kids used to go. And so when he died, they brought together the 30 staff members and they made a whole event. And everybody said how Zalmi, my son Zalmi, his name is Zalmi, he impacted everybody's life, over there. And that was very, very comforting. It was very nice of them to do it. And at the very end, there was one woman that she was reluctant. It seemed like the whole time to say anything. She was a woman of color. She was black, and she kept quiet in the back row. And I thought, maybe she won't say anything. And then at the end, she said, "Can I say something?" We said, "Sure." She says, "Your son Zalmi." She says, "Look at me." She says, "You see my face? I'm black. I'm not just black. I'm very black. When anyone looks at me, first thing they notice is not me as a person. They see me black." Says, "But your son Zalmi, he used to come to me, he used to caress my face, he used to hug me. He never looked at me as an inferior human being, as different. He just saw the humanity in me. He saw my soul." And so she said, you think your son was special needs and all of that. He taught me more than any other human being, how there's hope in the human race, that people can look beyond the externals and look a little bit deeper than that. So that's just that. Even after he passed away, I see what an impact he had on someone. So that personality, that who you are, still continues in hereafter. And the second point is how to reconnect. A lot of people ask the question, what can we do to reconnect? So one of the things we learned from the Rebbe was, the Rebbe always said, he gave a bracha, he always said, Asker alatziyim. The Rebbe would always say, I will mention it by the burial place of my father-in-law. The Rebbe used to pray a lot by his father-in-law. People needed a bracha, go pray at the place of the father-in-law, and who was the previous Lubavitcher. And this actually teaches us about, and the Rebbe kept on going there for years and years and maintaining that connection, that relationship with his father-in-law. So Taka, the father-in-law, was the Rebbe, and he was a great person. But as Jews, we know that there is the concept of visiting a cemetery. I believe that there are numerous portals to be able to reconnect to a loved one. And in my book, I speak a lot about 5 or 6 different portals that we're able to sort of create. It's almost like a computer. You have the portal. There are portals in this world that you can connect to the soul of a loved one. Almost like the Kotel Hamaravi, the Western Wall is a portal to the Beit HaMikdash, to heaven. We also have in this world certain portals, places, you can speak to your parent anywhere, wherever you are. But there are particular places. So one of them is to go visit the cemetery and show respect. And even though the body over there in the cemetery, it might, after many years, the physical disintegrates, but it always remains a portal to the soul. Because our sages teach us that there's a part of the body that never disintegrates, it always remains intact. It's called the loose bone. It's also connected to, Rabbi, I can tell you about how it's connected to Malava Malka. We eat Malava Malka, like the meal we're having right now, lighting a candle, that's connected to the loose bone. It's strengthened. But the loose bone is the indestructible part of the human body. It's the DNA that continues to be there forever. And that part of the body is what connects us. There are many other ways that we can make that reconnection. I remember, like there are many other portals in this world. After my son Zalmi passed away, we wrote a Sefer Torah. I made a little Sefer Torah. It's beautiful Torah that we have in the shul. And every time I hold the Torah, I feel a connection, because I did a mitzvah in his memory, and I wrote a Sefer Torah, which is about doing something tangible, either for the synagogue or even building a synagogue or writing a Torah or donating something or creating something in his memory, something that he connected to. And he loved to come to shul. One of the things he loved was sitting next to me in shul, always and kissing the Torah. So we decided we'll write a Torah. I write the Torah, and every time I take it out, people complain that that's the only Torah I use now in the shul. I say he has connections, he has connections. Other people say, "What about our Torah?" Okay, fine, thank you. Rabbi has first but I tell you, I just, when I hold the Torah, I feel a connection. And there are many other things. There are things like the Rebbe used to speak about. 770 is the shul that the Frierdiker Rebbe used to daven, and the Rebbe says that house of prayer, the place where he studied Torah, you can create a connection to a loved one through their home, through the place that they lived in a way. If that was a place, maybe a shul they went to, if you go there, or their home, there are an old home where they lived, and they did a lot of mitzvahs there. There is today a connection too. Garments also has a special connection to the person. There's a strange thing that they speak about shoes, that you're not supposed to give the shoes away to anybody else, because the shoes. I remember I went with a group to visit in Auschwitz. It's a very tragic place, and we walked through the Auschwitz. You're able to see over there all these mounds of tens of thousands of shoes And you look at them, you see each person, a shoe more than anything else, it takes the form of the person. I remember looking and seeing a little pair of shoes from a little girl, a red little pair of shoes over there. Like I can't get that out of my head. That little red pair of shoes, you could see the human being through that garment. This is, like I say, this is not a 15-20 minute talk over here. Probably I should talk for a few days on this. But that's the garments. That's other ways. I said I have 5 or 6 different portals, different ways that you connect. I remember when hearing about when the Chabad at the very, very beginning. People say Chabad is not so much into Israel, but it's quite the contrary. Right when the state of Israel was founded, Chabad opened up a place called Kfar Chabad, which is a beautiful, it was a village. Now it's almost like a city there. And today there's Chabad all over Israel. But then they went there, a bunch of the refugees from Eastern Europe. They were sent there, Chabadniks, and they became farmers, and they started to use tractors and they started building a city from scratch. And there was a very great tragedy in the early 50s, maybe it was 1956 or so. There was a great tragedy over there where there was one of the Rebbes was teaching students, and the Fayahidins, they came in over there, some of the terrorists, they came in and they shot up the teacher and 5 of his students. And the city was a mess. They all tried so hard to build Israel, and this is what they get in return. So they wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe comforted them in many different ways. He sent shluchim there to come and comfort them. But in addition to that, at some point he said, with the continuation of building, you will be comforted. He says, you want to know how to really connect to those people is by building for them. It's that way you bring eternity in this world, and you can constantly reconnect. And in fact, they built a whole school right in that spot where those children were murdered. They built this fantastic school for children of all the cities around in that region, and many kids. It was a trade school where they taught children different trades, and a lot of the immigrants from some of the Arab countries, from Morocco and Tunisia and all these countries, Algeria, they all came and they studied there. Many of them remember that was their first place of studying, and they studied Torah there as well. So it was like a trade school, and they built it right there. And that was the Rebbe's message: comfort will come through continuing building. And building in the memory of that person. So these are just some of the ideas. I also had an opportunity. My name is Rabbi Plotkin, but my first name is Avremela Ramelio. My Zayda was a big Chabad chassid. When he came out of Russia, he was a big goyin, a big teacher, famous teacher in Chabad, and he left manuscripts. My father gave me the responsibility or the honor to transcribe a lot of these manuscripts, and it was a great. But I just want to tell you about a portal. So I had these papers, these old papers from my Zayda, and I was working on them for many years, and. But more than the deep ideas that I connected to him by hearing his deep insights in Torah that he transcribed on it, I would look at this old brittle paper, and I would smell it. I sort of smell my Zayda, and I'd see like maybe a coffee stain, and I'd say, wow, he was drinking coffee or tea, whatever it was. And if I saw a cigarette burn, I could connect to his cigarettes. And if I saw a little something that looked like a hair, I said, maybe it's a hair of his beard. Like, wow. It's like I virtually connected to him through his ksavim. The Rebbe Rashab, when he passed away in Lubavitch, his son, the Frierdiker Rebbe, who's going to be the next Rebbe, was sitting right next to him. And the Rebbe Rashab was dying, and the Frierdiker Rebbe started to cry. So the Rebbe Rashab says, I taught you all these years, Chabad, you have to use your mind. You have to mind over matter. And then the Rebbe told him the important line. He says, Ich gehe in Himmel, I'm going to heaven, his father said, But the kesavim, my writings, I leave you. So I tell people, writings, I leave you. That means he left a tangible thing in this world called the writings. I tell people, if you have a letter from a parent, some writings, it's a good way to connect. I have a lot of times people coming to me that have letters in Yiddish from the Zayda, whatever, that they want me to translate. I said, don't give it away. Keep it. That's a way, that's a portal. That's a way to connect to a loved one, is their writings as well. So I gave you like five of them, but I just want to tell you the third point that the Rebbe told Sharon, the general. This is going to be like the final stretch. I don't know if I'm going too long or what, but are we okay?
Keep going. We have a few questions that have come in, but keep going.
Okay. So I'm just going to tell you my third point. The third point is that the Rebbe said to Sharon that we're telling you about Jerusalem to tell you that there's no one person of the Jewish people that's an individual. Every person is part of an unfolding story. Some people have a short part, some people have a long part, but everybody sparks something in this world. So no life is too short. Every life has a purpose and a meaning. And I think that's, to me, one of the greatest comforts, especially since I lost my son. He passed away so young, and that there is a purpose. So I'll tell you, like with my own son, my son Zalmi. So but 7 years ago, he passed away 3 years ago. So this is a story that happened 7 years ago. My Zalmi, he was growing up big. He was like physically fit, and he liked a lot of physical activities. So one of the things he loved most was to go to a jungle gym, like one of these places where you can, like a monkey bar or places to climb, and that was fascinating. So one time we had one that was about 5-minute drive from our home. We passed it. He said, "Oh, I want to go there." I give a look over there. Lo and behold, the place they wanted to go was in a non-kosher restaurant. It's a place, I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's called, I don't know if they have it in America. It's called Burger King. Burger King? They have it in America? No, they don't have it. No. So there's a Burger King. I said, "Oh no, what am I going to do?" But he was very, very persistent. He says he wants to go there. So I started taking him there from time to time. He had a name that he called it. I forget what he called it, that place. And he's always to ask to go. Then I would take him there. So one time, my daughter was having a Sheva Brachas, and the Mechatanu were waiting. I was late. What I used to do every time, not to go in, I'd never go inside. I'd bring my nanny along, my domestic help. She'd go along with me. I'd drop her off. She'd take him in there, stay there for a while, and then she'd call me up. I'd go back. So we had a Sheva Brachas. My wife said, "Go pick up Zalms." I thought, "Oh, you must be at the Burger King." So I go and I run there. It's a 5-minute drive. And I get there and I realize I left my cell phone home. To go back home, it was already the Mechatanim were waiting. We were late. So I said, I guess I'll have to, find a way to get him. So I didn't want to go in. So I just walk around a few times the room there. And I put my face inside it. Probably I thought a crazy rabbi putting his face into the window there. But then I said, he's not coming. I don't see him. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my hat down, black hat, put it down, and go inside, say Shema Yisrael, and run inside, and just hope nobody catches me. And I'll grab my son and run out. So I do that. I put my hat down. I say Shema Yisrael. I run in. And the moment I run in, somebody says, "Rabbi Plotkin, what are you doing here?"
I can explain.
Caught red hand. I say, "Nikki, what are you doing here?" I remember this girl. She was there. Nikki, I knew her. She was a girl from our shul that was by us like 10 years earlier. And she had her mother actually became a Balas Tshuva. She became quite religious. And Nikki disappeared 10 years from the face of the earth. I remember she married a Greek guy, and moved away and had some kids. So I said, "Nikki, what are you doing here?" She says, "You won't believe what just happened." She says, "My mother just died a few months ago, and I'm sitting here in this restaurant with my kids." She says, "I'm sitting here, and I know I shouldn't be eating the cheeseburgers and everything like that, Rabbi. But I just gave it all up. But I'm sitting here, and I started having a conversation with my mother. And I said, 'Mother in heaven, I think God forgot about me.'" She said, "I said to my mother, if Hashem is thinking about me, if he cares about me anymore, please show me a sign. And as I'm saying that to myself, what bigger sign gonna have than a rabbi in Burger King? you walk in over. I said, Nikki, what are you doing for the Seder? She says, nothing. It was a few weeks before Pesach. I said, you got to come to the Seder. I just want to tell you this: the story unfolds in an amazing way. And it's all because of my son Zalmi that used to go over there to this Burger King. Nikki started coming came to our house for the Seder. And the next year we did a bar mitzvah, the son Alex. And the following year, Alex goes to a Jewish camp, a sleepaway camp called Laman Achai. He calls me up Saturday night and he says, can you come tomorrow, Sunday morning? I want to have a bris. So I went there. He never had a bris because his father wasn't Jewish. I went there, we did a bris. Okay. And started getting involved more and more. And he went to Yeshiva Milwaukee. Now he's one of the top students in Mayanot. And not only that, but he says he wants to be a rabbi. What kind of crazy thing is that? I don't know. He wants to be a shliach.
It was a good story until that part.
Yeah, he wants to be a shliach. But not only that, it's not just Alex. By the bris, he asked for her name. And what's his name? His name is now Alex Menachem Mendel. That's his Hebrew name. That's the name. And I look at him and I say, wow, this is my son Zalmi's doing. In his own way, he was the catalyst that made me go there. Wasn't much, but this brought a whole family. Now, this year, all the kids, he has 5 kids, they're all going to camp. It's costing me a bundle. If anybody wants to help me out, you're welcome to help me. But they're all going to the Jewish camps, and the second son now wants to have a bris too. And it's mamish, a whole mapecha in this family, a whole revolution in this family, all because of so we're all part of a bigger picture that unfolds. And I just want to conclude with I think that if you could look at life as like a big play, and I write that in the book, the story, like in a play, whatever play it is, some people have small parts, some people have longer parts. And there are many, many different scenes. And what happens, the scenes, different actors come on, some people have a one-liner and others have 5 pages worth, right, of a play. But what happens ultimately at the end of the play, that when the play finishes, what happens? When the play ends, all the actors, they come out and they all reunite and they all give a bow together, because this was the story that was unfolding. I believe that all the generations from the beginning, from Adam and Eve, from Avraham Avinu, Avraham and Sarah, all the generations, every generation was another scene. And the play continues and continues. And there are some people that have bigger parts, some have small, but everyone has an essential part. Like we said before, the individual soul is indispensable to the picture of Klal Yisrael. And at the end, please God, we will all come out on the stage and we all bow down together, because we will all be reunited with our loved ones, not just spiritually up in the heavens, which we will see them all in heaven, but also down here on earth, the revival of the dead, the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. Amen.
Amen. Rabbi, thank you. Wonderful and overwhelmed. We do have a few questions. You have a few minutes you can give us to, people did ask me, and if somebody would like to unmute themselves, please do. And
I just want to recognize Rabbi Mendel Moskowitz, an old chabrusa of mine. I happen
He's
to
not
see
so old. He's young.
Well, if he's anywhere near my age, he's.
So a couple of questions. One was a technical question. You mentioned about the custom about not giving away the shoes. Can you just talk about what the people do with the shoes? Can you just talk about that for a moment or so?
It's always a complicated thing. It just says you don't give it to other people. Eventually, you could throw out shoes. It's not a problem, but you don't give it to anyone else. I remember after my Zalmi passed away, he left a pair of shoes in the back seat of my car, like his sneakers. I couldn't move those sneakers. They were there for 2 years, sitting there in the back seat of the car, because I don't know, I connected with that, which I thought. Eventually, I didn't keep it, but it's.
Another question that came in is about friends who've passed away, not relatives. Is there still a connection between friends or is it only somebody who you have a biological family connection with?
I believe that anyone we meet in our life is part of our mission. So if our mission is eternal, so we have a connection to anyone that we have you know what I mean? If you did a mitzvah together with someone or some kind of spiritual connection, they chavrusa, like Mandy Maskus, my chavrusa in Miami, we're connected forever. So like, the connections, all of Klal Yisrael is like a big puzzle piece. And everybody has, they're all the puzzle pieces connect and interconnect to each other. So that connection is there forever.
Can you speak about the idea that we are often taught that at a simcha, bar mitzvah, a wedding, the generations come, they're at the wedding. Is that something that we do believe in? Is that an urban legend? What is that idea? And can you talk about that a little bit?
By a wedding, it's brought down in some of the holy books that you go to the cemetery before a wedding, and you actually bring an invitation. You invite them. I go sometimes to some stones and I see an invitation sitting there. But there is a custom to go actually and invite them to come, and it's a tradition. It's a Kabbalistic tradition more that the souls of the departed they are there and they are present at the chuppah. I find many times it's you can almost feel their presence if you knew them. Their presence is very much felt there.
I have one more question that was submitted. And again, if somebody else wants to unmute themselves and jump in, I'm happy to let you participate there. The question was asked about a yard site. What is the significance of a yard site, not only for the mourners, but for the person who's passed away? I'm getting a few more questions via text and so on, so let me do the best I can.
Okay. Well, a yard site, we are taught that the soul constantly grows spiritually in the heavenly space. And the date of the passing is the date of the graduation of the soul from one level to another. So that extra strength, that extra growth that the soul experiences on the day of the yard site has a positive impact on the soul, and also all those that are connected to the soul. They too is a trickle-down effect that is trickled down to those loved ones down here on earth, that they are also enriched spiritually by that growth of the soul. A lot of people have a problem with it because on the one hand it says that the soul goes higher and higher on the day of the yard site. People say, "Oh well, we're losing the soul." It's like they're going farther away from us. It's not true. The higher they are, the greater they are, the more ability they have to connect, down to earth. And
we have another question that came in. It's perhaps a little bit of an uncomfortable question. What about people who maybe had a difficult relationship with someone, and now that person's passed away? What can be done? Can there be something done? Maybe the living person feels like they don't want to be connected with that person anymore, or is there some posthumous repair that can occur?
There are abusive relationships also, which are those are obviously very, very difficult ones. I speak a lot of it in the book. So if anyone wants, that's the storyline. And Jerry has a problem with his father. I think it's very important to have in life to have reconciliation, even though to forgive and to ask for forgiveness is a very, very important part of life. And we're taught that a person before they die, vidui, they ask God for forgiveness, and they also offer forgiveness to all those that have hurt them in life. So one thing is to ask for forgiveness from someone that passed away. There are ways to do it by going to the cemetery, and sometimes you can even bring a minion along to publicly ask for forgiveness if it was where you embarrassed the person publicly, etc. So there is a ritual to do that, but at the same time also not just to ask for forgiveness, but also to offer forgiveness. We believe that the soul, after it passes away, comes to its senses, and the soul itself is good, the evil that is done in this world is really external, and the soul makes mistakes here down on earth. That's because of its bad influences. But essentially, every person is perfect. Every person is a part of God. So we believe that the soul, when it comes to heaven, it suddenly realizes its mistakes, and that's what the first year of rehabilitation is about. That if the soul did make mistakes in this world, even very, very severe mistakes, it's brought to their attention, and they have remorse for it. So, I believe that people should work very, very hard to get beyond those physical separations, and to try to reconcile even posthumously.
There was a question if you could talk a little bit more about the luz bone and Malava Malka. People picked up on that connection that you made. If you could elaborate on that for a moment or so.
Well, the luz bone is really it says Hashem is going to reconstruct the body in Tchiyat HaMesim, in the revival of the dead, from the luz bone. Why does God have to that is one little bone that's never destroyed, and for that God will rebuild the body. The question is, well, why does he have to rebuild from a bone? If he's already doing a miracle, he's bringing the person back to life. Why does he have to start off with a bone? Today with science, there's a little bit more of an understanding, because there's the DNA, right? So it's sort of Hashem takes the existing DNA and it almost becomes a natural thing in a way. Hashem is going to make it almost like it says, there won't be any difference between the days of the Mashiach and today. Everything will be natural. How could it be all natural if there's revival of the dead? But maybe it'll come a time where that too will be sort of a natural phenomenon. But regardless, as of now, it still is quite miraculous. But the luz to me is almost like it's the kernel of hope. It's like the Kotel Hamaravi. It's a part of the Beis Hamikdash, even though the physical Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. But one wall was never destroyed. In the physical, not just in the spiritual, the soul we know lives on, etc., etc. But the luz bone is a part of the physical body that's never destroyed. And so there is, even the body has an aspect of eternity, because the body will come back. So that is what the luz bone. So it says that by when Matzah Shabbos comes, it's a little bit sad, because on Shabbos it says we have an extra infusion of the soul. We have an extra Shabbos soul, it says. So when Matzah Shabbos comes, we're mourning the loss of the potential we had on Shabbos. So we're in a state of mourning, and that's why it says we use the besamim, is to sort of comfort ourselves. It's the smell, it's the neshama, it's you're comforting yourself with the Havdalah service. It's a form of comfort. And also Malava Malka is also the same thing. It's you're escorting the neshama. So the whole process of Malava Malka is also about strengthening our hope in the coming of the Mashiach, strengthening our hope, the revival of the dead, strengthening our hope in a future return to Yerushalayim, and it's the same theme. So that's what it means. It's brought down in some svarim that Malava Malka actually strengthens our luz bone. You can see the symbolism there.
A couple of more questions came in, Rabbi. If you have some more time, people asked, do we have any sense if a soul, when it passes, can find a soul? If a child passes, do they find their parents' soul in Shemayim? The souls know each other when they come into heaven?
So I have a whole chapter on that in my book. How do we identify souls? Like, what's, you know what I mean? Like, it's just a spirit. Like, so how do we identify it? So there's a lot in it in Tanya. You know, if you could look at it, the soul is not just a blob of energy. It has a personality. It has 10 sfirot. It has 10 attributes that comprise the soul. And the person that we know down here is not just, it's a combination of body and soul. And most of the personality that we have, we think it's the DNA, but there are three partners. There's Hashem and the parents. So there's the physical and the spiritual. So the soul too has a personality. So you can, when you you can perceive your parent, even if you were blind, you know your parent, So even if we can't see the body in heaven, we know the personality, and that's what we will recognize is the particular combinations of the intelligence, the emotional structure, the tenacity of that person. All those things are still there, totally intact. And that's what we will relate to. Plus, there's also the good deeds that we do in our life. We are taught creates garments of the soul. Every mitzvah we do creates garments. So the soul is beautified. It says it's crowned. The soul in heaven is it's brought down, has crowns on. Those crowns really are the garments of the soul with which we can also. So that's a second way of identifying the mitzvahs. So the person was a Baal Chesed, a Baal Tzedakah. So that tzedakah stays with the person, and you can sort of locate the soul based on all of that together.
Okay, so much more is in the rabbi's book, 7 Conversations with Jerry. We have it here, available for purchase. I mean, somebody asked me to read through the table of contents, animation, identification, destination, elation, connection, transition, continuation. And Rabbi, one question came in, which I know you'll be happy to answer, which is people would like to help you. Oh, okay, hold on one second. People would like to help with these children. So when we are done, if you would be kind enough to send me a link so that people who want to contribute, I'll send it out with the recording on the WhatsApp for the community. So please do that. Send me a link.
You can send it to chabadmarkham.org. There's the donate there.
Okay. All right. Fine. And I'll include that in the WhatsApp.
Make a note. It's for the Chesed fund. For the
Chesed fund. Okay. We'll include that there. Okay. Bachi, you wanted to ask something? Please do.
What can we do for the souls that don't have the guf anymore? Good luck and keep on trucking.
Okay, thank you. What can we do for the souls that don't have bodies anymore? So this is a very important thing. It's the Rebbe once said to him, a mother lost a child. Also said like the mother was distraught. The Rebbe said if I tell you that your child is still alive, just in another country, and you can still connect to that child there, and you can still send gifts, presents to the child. Would that make you comforted? She said, yeah, that would help me a lot if I knew they were alive. Rabbi said, well, the truth of the matter is that the soul of your child is still somewhere, and you can always send that child beautiful gifts. You know that they're happy, they're secure, in a good place. And what you can do is you can always send gifts. Then what are the gifts? The gifts are the mitzvahs we do in their honor. All the mitzvahs we do in their honor in this world. It could be lighting candles. It could be putting on tefillin. It could be making challah. It could be all the different mitzvahs that we have, 613. We do it in their honor. Those mitzvahs become gifts to our loved one, and we can send to them gifts of love.
I have a question too.
Okay.
On the same theme of children, do you have advice for explaining the loss of a loved one to children?
I'm sorry, the loss of a...
The loss of a loved one, explaining it to children. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, that's a very, very hard thing. I mean, there's some nice ideas that I have in the book that can probably be used. Some of those, because a lot of the ideas there are fairly simplified. I think they have to speak one-on-one with someone that's a expert in bereavement. Obviously, we tell the child that the loved one is in heaven and they're in a good place and they're happy, and you still can connect to them and do mitzvahs in their honor. I mean, those are all the things. But children, I think they need one-on-one with somebody that can really open up with them, speak to them closely. I can't really tell you just something like that. So it's very hard.
Rabbi, you may. I just have one question. You may have touched on this, and I might have missed it because I was a little late. So first of all, thank you for this. But I just wanted to ask you, if there is a difficult personality, particularly if there are people who are mean, I mean, it does exist. What happens on the next levels? Do they can retain that nastiness? I may have missed this. Or does it go away, and do they, through seeing reality, turn into, different souls. I wasn't clear on that.
Yeah, I would say that every souls in their pristine state are perfect. They might have strength, great strength, and when they come down to this world, they misinterpret it as meanness. So the meanness is an external thing. No soul is created mean.
Right.
A soul might be created with great energy, of great emotional energy, right? And they choose in this world to direct it in a mean
Negative.
direction, negative direction. But the soul itself is non-negative. The soul returns back to its original, to its pristine state. I believe it will drop that mean streak, but it still has those qualities that may have led it to being very opinionated or strong, which are not essentially bad. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Rabbi, we thank you so much for these meaningful words. Again, 7 conversations with Jerry. I don't know if you can see it clearly. We have it here. If anybody would like to purchase it, we want to thank all the people who helped financially to make this evening possible. We want to thank Rabbi Plotkin. We want to thank, of course, my wife, whose idea this was, and Mrs. Rivka Rappaport, who made the beautiful flyer and set up the Zoom. And thank you all for participating. Hashem should bless us to fulfill the words of the prophets of Ubila Hamabas Lenetzach. Death should be swallowed up for all times and erase tears from our eyes. And we should gather together to speak about happy and joyous things in an evident and obvious way, be reunited with all of our loved ones, and be able to celebrate together the Gula Mitzvos Shlema. So thank you to Rabbi Plotkin. I'll send out the recording, chabadmarkram.com. for people who .org, chabadmarkham.org/donate. If people would like to help send those children to camp, people did ask for it, and I'll include it when I send out the recording on the WhatsApp. And of course, there's programs in learning in Zoom and in person throughout the week. This week, you're going to have the book club and so forth. So we look forward to joining together for joyous things. Rabbi Plotkin, thank you. Yashakayach to you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your inspiring words and for your information. Agutavach.
Thank you very much for having me. It was really an enjoyable crowd and a nice interaction. And I wish you all a good tavach, and we should very soon merit to a time of only happiness for all of us and all of our families.
Amen. Amen. A good tavach.